Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm your host, Ben Martinek, with the Catholic Money Mastermind, associated with the Catholic Financial Planners Network. I am joined today again with another new member of ours, Joe Petry, hailing from the great area of St. Louis, Missouri. Yeah, Kirkwood specifically, right? Is that where you're from, Joe?
Right. Go Cards.
Oh, okay. We got a Cardinals fan. Hopefully that's okay with some of you there. No, I'm for I grew up in the Illinois area, so Chicago Cubs are a little more my cup of tea. But I've got some affinity for the Cardinals. Nothing wrong.
But, you grew up in central Illinois. It's like literally right between Chicago and St. Louis, right? So you had to decide.
I know. I was torn between multiple locations. Yeah, like, I don't know. I'm undecided. Yeah. So maybe if you were, just a fair weather fan for all of them, yeah, whoever's winning this year is going to be the one I'll cheer for.
So I tried being a fair weather fan, but I learned very quickly moving to St. Louis, you cannot be a fair weather fan. You are Cardinals through and through, or you're out.
That's right, huh?
It's true.
Don't walk around with a Cubs shirt in St. Louis. Is what
I did that as a joke, and the joke was on me. It was not good.
I've got an interesting story of that with the Vikings and the Green Bay Packers up this way, Joe, too. But I won't. I digress too much. I won't go into it. But similar story. Don't go to a Vikings game wearing Green Bay Packers
right
outfit. Yeah, attire. Well, Joe, thanks for joining me today. Joe has a firm, Mayfair Financial, out of the St. Louis area. And, as we do with all our guests, I'd like to just to share a little bit, Joe, about your background and your story. I mean, what's particularly interesting for me is that you've got a PhD in economics, but I'll kind of leave you to kick it over from there. But, what brought you into the industry? What's some of your career path or journey?
Yeah, great, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it. So yeah, a little bit of different. I'm a career changer. I have a PhD in economics, worked in the private sector, worked on Wall Street for a number of years, worked in a number of different firms as an economist, taught economics, macroeconomics, micro financial markets over the years. That has really kind of been my whole thing through my career, is educating on economic and financial markets. And so I retired a little bit early from one of my positions. And it was at that point that I just very quickly realized, wow, this retirement thing is a lot more complicated than the accumulation years. Accumulation years, you're just socking away as much as you can and putting that in the 401k and putting some Roth money away. But the decumulation years, when you stop having that paycheck, there's a real psychological change that takes place. And that's what inspired me to actually get involved with this, because it's like, wow, that it feels different to be retired. And even though I didn't anticipate staying retired, I still experienced that. And that's what, got me thinking, gosh, okay, well, I need to learn about this. The tax implications are complex, and Social Security and all kinds of different things. And go ahead.
Just to jump in, quickly, I mean, I can imagine on the accumulation side, if you have any financial struggles or worries or difficulties or just concerns, it's like, well, the solution is I'll just get another paycheck, right? I'll just go and work some more. And there you go. I mean, hopefully that resolves it. I mean, that's not always the end of it, of the solution, but like that's what we go to as the next item. And I'm sure there's security in that, but I have a feling that as you entered into retirement, maybe you lost that security. Is that what you felt?
Yeah, absolutely. All of a sudden I can't help you feel it other than just to describe it. It's like, it's a shift. And you just, intrinsically kind of like, wow, this feels different. Now I look at my investments very differently, because I'm now relying on those to pay the way for, 40 years or 30 years, whatever it happens to be. And so, I've heard people talk about that before, but I really only came to appreciate it when I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, and I would imagine maybe there would be a natural response of scarcity to this, of like, oh, I can't spend any of this investment money because it's like your only rope you're hanging on, and if this goes away, like, it's gone. So like that would be a particular challenge, and we don't have to go further with this necessarily, but is that kind of the concern? Is just like, oh, everything clenched fist kind of approach to
it
spending?
Absolutely is. And of course, I'm trained as an economist, so scarcity is right up my alley. So you're just like, oh my gosh, this is it. And, I have history with financial markets. I know, the ups and downs, and, you've got to be thinking through with that to make sure you're going to be well situated.
Well, cool. So, I mean, you had a prior work as an economist, and then saw firsthand the need maybe for your own purposes to do some retirement planning and just give yourself a greater degree of confidence as to what the plan was, and then saw that as an opportunity maybe to do a career shift fully into financial planning.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's when I started getting educated. So I got a master's in financial planning and I got my CFP, and started working at a firm out in California, very small firm, of a colleague of mine who I'd known for many years and trusted. And it turned out to be just a fascinating and very enjoyable shift and really meaningful work, from my perspective.
Right, just touching the lives of people and getting to know them, I imagine, and hopefully being that difference maker or the guide, and giving them the assurance that perhaps you were looking for previously in that transition, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like the idea of being a trusted guide, that kind of encapsulates at least the way I feel our role is. Certainly, I think regardless of your niche and your specialization, but especially for retirement, because there's so many uncertainties and people, there's a little bit of cognitive decline, as people age. And so there's some vulnerability there that, I just feel very protective of my clients and want to make sure that they're being taken care of correctly, especially, so many of my clients, they've accumulated and worked so hard during their working years. I want to make sure that they're able to enjoy that, that part of because it can be so great to be retired. But not if you're anxious about it all the time, and not if you're making decisions that aren't going to help you down the road.
For sure. It's funny. I mean, in this work, sometimes we say, it's just money, so what's the big deal? At least I'm not doing brain surgery or something where there's, heart surgery, some significant liability. But then on the other hand, I'm reminded well, we are working with people's life savings. Like they spent their whole life working towards this. It's kind of a big deal, actually. It isn't just their money, it's their money. Ultimately,
and it isn't brain surgery per se, but it may have to pay for the brain surgery. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, we want to feel confident or comfortable with that and not be living, it's funny. Maybe it's just another comment here before we pivot into the topic at hand. There's just, a common theme of whether or not we're doing our job well is, can our clients or can we even sleep at night? And I think when I first got into this business, I thought, oh, come on. I mean, what's the big deal? Can you sleep at night? But I got to just say, as I've gone on and we've taken on more and more responsibility and we have the weight of these decisions for ourselves and for our clients, it's like, no, that's a real test. Can you still sleep at night? And if you can't, okay, things are going well. But if you can't, that's what happens. You struggle. The real weight of this hits you home and you do struggle. And just sheerly sleeping each night is sometimes a challenge, right?
And I hope everybody that starts in this business feels that way, at least for a while, because to me, that's a test of, do they care? Because unfortunately, there's a lot of people that never lose sleep over things that, concern somebody else's situation. And, and that's clearly not people in the Catholic Financial Planning Network. And, that's why it's one of the reasons it's so much fun to be involved.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, good for you, Joe, for joining the network and giving us some of your background. So, I mean, I think the topic at hand, and it kind of reiterates upon some of what we've already discussed. I think it's more broadly this just notion of what makes a good advisor. That was what we wanted to have our conversation on. And we have chatted on that in prior episodes. So listeners, if you've tuned in, Lance Peters' episode in particular, I feel really went into this in rather great detail, especially with the notion of what makes a Catholic financial advisor different, maybe from an advisor who's only a non-believer would be perhaps the best way to describe them. But, our question isn't just simply about a religious faith adherence necessarily. It's also just a question of soft skills and connecting with people and seeing their humanity in them. And maybe one of the best ways that exemplifies a person's humanity isn't where they've gotten everything right in their life and, everything is shiny and perfect and it looks great. They have a nice, Facebook or social media profile. What really differentiates or people struggle with is where they haven't gotten things right and they've messed up and they've had mistakes, some oopsies, maybe as we would call them, right? And so, Joe, you have some work that you had wanted to share, and I'll leave this as a segue into that. That you're work of ministry. I suppose maybe could you just share a little about the work of ministry that you've been involved with and that you do, and somehow how that connects back to you as an advisor?
Sure. Yeah, it'd be a pleasure. It's another, by controlling my own schedule, which is, what I can do, kind of having my own firm, it's really allowed that. And it's been part of my shift as a human being to really focus on that, that side of who I am as a person, and to really integrate completely, I hope, at least in the process with my faith. And so the things that have been meaningful that I've been able to, be participating with in new ways, would be, two things, I guess, kind of really come to mind. One is, we started a refugee ministry here at my parish around Afghan refugees. So people before me, were seeing the need of people who'd been left in Afghanistan, in a very vulnerable position because they helped the U.S. military in some way, shape, or form, or were associated with the U.S. government, and were literally at risk of being murdered in front of their families, et cetera. And so, huge vulnerability there. And so we pair with some other organizations to help people who have come from Afghanistan with, approval and support of the U.S. government, and get them on their feet. So it's, teach them to fish kind of thing. Mm. So the objective is we have a year with them where we try to commit for, a minimum of a year. And during that time, we're putting kids in school, getting them to the dentist. A lot of these kids have never seen a dentist. I mean, so dentist appointments are like a big deal. And so we're, doing all that stuff, teaching them how to grocery shop and public services and, transportation. And St. Louis isn't a great city for public transportation. So we try to get cars donated, which, we were able to do, with this last family we've been working with. And it just, I think, gosh, how does that all relate back to, to the financial services industry and our business? To me, it's just about, understanding and building compassion for everybody's situation. I can't help but have great pride in my country and the things that these people have done for our country. And I want to repay that. And I want to be part of the solution for that. And that's all tied in with my faith. So just being able to listen to people's stories with compassion and non-judgment and, meeting them where they are. They're not going to be clients, I'll tell you that. They come over
right.
literally with nothing. Wow. It's just, it is amazing, the challenges that these people have. And it's just an honor to be able to be associated with that in any way.
I'm sure, Joe, though, it has to reset your perspective some, right? I mean, we describe this sometimes as first world problems, second world problems, third world problems. And maybe one of the more favorite ways I like to describe first world problems is something that someone once coined as champagne problems. It's like, our problems could be from an issue of abundance. That's where our problem comes in. And in particular, maybe we could be seeing that with our clients too, where their money problem isn't that they've got too little money. So they've got so much money and they're not sure what to do with it and how to pass it on or where it should go.
Right.
And so I think there's got to be something about just having some perspective on the other side of this issue with people having nothing and just resetting, not just maybe for our clients, but minimally, at least just for yourself of like, look, whatever challenges I'm facing, like, golly, let's just keep that in mind. It does get worse. It could be so much worse. And just to be grateful, really, maybe. Do you feel like it just fosters gratitude at a fundamental level?
So much so. It fosters gratitude in myself and our family and the people that were, the other people in the parish that we're working with on this. And I hope and I believe gratitude in the people that we're working with because, again, they're such a vulnerable group that, it would be really hard for them to literally get by without help. And they're, very proud people and work so hard. The guys, got a full-time job. He's got 8 kids. I mean, this is the family
Wow.
we just completed with, they got here in a year ago, July, and they had one child here. A lot of these families are younger, as you imagine. I mean, they were associated with the military and things. So, they literally had a baby here, after being here for a month. And so they're dealing with, all the demands of that. And he's got he drives an Uber, and he's full-time job. And the mom, culturally, they basically don't go out of the house much. And
Yeah.
so, it's amazing how hard they work and what they put forth. And so being able to help and support them is awesome.
Well, all I can say is good for you. Really. I mean, I just to say state of publicly, thank you. For this work. I mean, thank you for what you're doing and really witnessing Christ's love. I mean, what's coming to mind for me is, the end of St. Matthew's Gospel, in which there's the shepherding of the sheeps and the goats, and when did I ever love you, or I mean, give you drink, or thirsty, or visit you? It's like whenever you did that. When you did it for the least of my brothers, when you did that for them, you're doing it for me. And so I'm sure that's present in your mind, but, just thank you for that witness. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of this. I'm sure others are too, where we're just so busy with ourselves and our own lives and just our own daily schedules and taking care of our families, but we don't pause and start to think of others, really, and to reset and making that a priority.
Yeah.
So maybe could you share a little bit, Joe, did you just feel compelled, or what moved you into this ministry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to me, it was a big part of it. I mean, clearly prioritizing my faith. How do I become a better Christian? How do I become the hands and feet of Christ? I've got to do things differently than I did earlier in my life. And so literally, looking for ways to do that. But what really inspired me around this was my mom. Took me around when she was volunteering after the Vietnam War. She helped Vietnamese veterans, or not veterans, but Vietnamese refugees, boat people who would come over to the U.S. in a very similar situation. And so in some sense, I'm also honoring my mom, Joanne, as a part of this. So, but Ben, there's one story that it's unusual to be able to see the other side of this. And in this case, having clients who have been here for some time, I've actually got a Vietnamese family, two Vietnamese individuals who married, who were both in this exact same situation, when my mom was doing this volunteer work.
Okay.
And just to see how it can turn out for people that work hard and focus. And in this case, their faith is paramount in their life. And I just seeing that just really, brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah, maybe just having like the blessed assurance, right? I mean, there's any of this work is an act of faith. It doesn't necessarily have to be religious motivated. I mean, just even on a secular level, to commit to this daily labor and the belief that this will pay off and have, fruits just in this own world, to see it from start to finish. I mean, I think where this does, if I could, where this could really connect with financial advising, because so much of the work I think we do, my background ultimately was in the seminary and religious life. And so very much infused with church teaching and doctrine and sacred liturgy and just a lot of beautiful things. But, what's central all that is a life of faith, right? And you wouldn't necessarily think of managing other people's assets or money or finances being like a continuation of a life of faith. But I will say, I think this is like front and center, because so much of our work is about managing and dealing with uncertainty and the unknown, and believing, hoping for a better tomorrow, and the belief that the good work that we do today will bear fruit, and trusting in that. And some of this takes, not just years or decades, it could be generations, of time before this will all come to pass. And like in all of that, there has to be just this wellspring foundation of faith that keeps you going, especially when you're getting bogged down with those challenges and the delays and the frustrations that we all experience, right? And so I think I just would want to echo this notion of just how central faith is, but seeing the work completed with this client, with the work started with your mom and now maybe coming to full completion circle with your, with the family, has to give some degree of confidence then in your work as an advisor to say, look, I know that if we do these things, it will pay off, and you can continue like this work of faith. I mean, I'm just wondering, do you find maybe in some ways like this is like a proof of sorts of faith in action, and that let's continue down this pathway as like
It
a
is.
practical benefit of the work?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just because you can see kind of the end product of what is possible. I mean, it's amazing. And the work is, that we do is very, humdrum day to day. I mean, get them to the dentist and,
Sure.
teach them how to get to school and, get the girls into school because, they haven't had any real schooling. And it's hard because, in our case, the individual, the family, the particular family we just have kind of finished our year with, they were illiterate in their own language, let
Wow.
alone didn't speak or write English. And so, the change for the next generation from being basically, especially the girls, being huddled in their back room pretty much their whole life,
Wow.
to going to school and getting, one of the girls got an award at school and she's in front of the whole school and the teacher is there and making a big deal out of her. And, there's the girls, you just see the shyness and it's, a lot of that socialized and, to provide an opportunity for them to shine in a way that they may not have that opportunity back in their home country. It's an honor to be able to do that,
Yeah, I just this whole notion of lending a helping hand, which is I feel like just captures this so much. It's impactful. There's another project or ministry that you do, Joe, and I want to take a moment and pivot into that. But before I do, something that's kind of speaking to me is, look, how do you make this practically executable in your life? Because I mean, we all have our commitments, and as a moment ago you said, it's just a matter, it's a priority that you make, but like perhaps someone's listening to the show and they're like, I want to make a priority of this too. They've been moved and they feel the need for this. Like, what was the first couple of steps that you took that started to make this a real priority if it changed? And now this is something you do and not just something you hope to do.
Yeah. Well, in our case, this was a ministry that we started in our parish, so it didn't exist. And we did find another parish in St. Louis that had done this before us. And that helped a lot because what we found was, we're going to have to develop a team, which, our approach was, well, let's develop a team from within the parish to do this as part of our, faith life. And, we had a lot of people. In our first year, we had 19 people on our team.
Wow.
And so we had a lot of support. It's amazing the group that volunteered. And we got multiple doctors. We got, school psychologists. You couldn't have designed a better group, and everybody had their niche and everybody participated, and some much more than others. But that was the power of what we did, I think, is we created it such that it wasn't going to be overwhelming, and we're going to try and get it done, little bits of time, little bits of pieces to get going and figure it out and then build from there and not overwhelm people and have it, kind of fizzle out.
Well, that's kind of, I mean, I think this reiterates too. I mean, so much work is just, there's an expression, and maybe it's a Chinese proverb of sorts, but it says, a bamboo grows, the roots for 5 years and you see nothing externally. And then in the course of a couple of months, I think it grows to its full height, and so it seems to come out of nowhere, but it was all preceded by, a lot of preparation, that was invisible. And you can get recognizing that a lot of the work that we do may not become demonstrable anytime soon. You get discouraged, and well, maybe you lose faith is where it comes down to. But it's also perhaps just how you manage it and just not taking too much off at a time. Could you speak a little bit about just how you kept the goal in front of you and made sure that maybe you made steady progress or the like? I mean, just how did you pull this off of just in itself making this happen and not letting things fizzle out? Because that's what I would imagine. It's like, oh man, it's just going to fizzle out, because that's the challenge. It's keeping it together, right?
Yeah, I think The only way I can explain that is this was God's work.
Yeah.
God did that part.
Sure.
All I did was, try to be responsive to what he had in mind. And it's amazing how it kind of magically, perhaps miraculously came together.
Right.
To have the group of volunteers that we had, we just put an announcement in the parish bulletin, said, we're going to try this. And if anybody wants to join us, please come to our information night. And we talked about it, and we had a group of 19, and, then we got our first family, and just really, worked great. And then we just, repeated that process and are picking up our second family, in the next couple of weeks. So.
Got it. Yeah. So look, maybe at the end of the day, this is just like, look, it's not all in our hands. We do what we can. But then, there's a saying out there, you do the work as if it all depends on you, but pray as if it all depends on God. And that just kind of captures the notion that there's just only so much that we can do at the end of the day. If this isn't his will or desire for it, then, that'll become known too. It'll either take off or it won't, it's not fully up to us, is it? So,
yeah, I think that's right. And just us stepping back, the ego has no part in this. Just, this is God, this is God's work. If it's, start with prayer, and if there's inspiration there, then, God will make that happen. So.
Yeah. Well, Joe, there's just so much about this that's really beautiful. And I'm very intrigued about the other ministry that you're involved with, and would like to ask you a few questions on that. But before I do, I just would like to remind our audience that, if you're looking for advisors who are connected and committed to, other aspects of life outside of finance and money, and who, are living a life of faith, and who are, responding to the call, the good news of Jesus, be sure to check out Catholic Financial Planners Network. We've got several dozen advisors now listed there. You can certainly reach out to Joe and his firm and potentially connect with him. But we've got other advisors too who are similarly like-minded, and this can be a really good opportunity for you, maybe, especially if you're looking to probably bring your finances and become integrated in this work of ministry, of volunteerism, and reaching out to others. Maybe we can help you make that happen as well. So,
wait,
Joe,
Ben, just before you go on, I'd just like to say how much, I've appreciated. I'm just, catching on to the Catholic Financial Planners Network and appreciating the work that went in to create this over multiple years before I've even, found it, and the people that are involved, and, the meetings that we have where we're, off, amongst ourselves with interesting speaker and things. It's just amazing. And it's such a exciting group to be a part of. It really helps build my faith. I appreciate it.
Well, praise God to that. That's what I have. Praise
Amen.
God for sure for the good work that he's doing here. Well, Joe, you have another line of work that you're involved with, or volunteerism, and it's rather distinct from this. Similarly moded. It's outward facing. It's helping others who are distressed. And really maybe taking someone who has nothing, as we just shared, and giving them a chance for something, and really giving them, expressing gratitude back to them for their own sacrifices and the risk that they took to be of help ultimately to us as a nation. But, echoing some of the sentiment that I shared at the beginning of the podcast, and also just remembering, like what makes for a good advisor. Part of your other work in ministry is with folks, have found themselves in a bad way, perhaps of their own doing, maybe because of life's, their background and just the hand that they were dealt. But, could you share a little bit about this other ministry and perhaps how it relates?
Yeah, sure. So this is Kairos Prison Ministry. And it's something that I kind of came to through involvement in parish retreats or ACTS retreats. I don't know, Ben, if your parish has ACTS retreats.
I'm not actually. If you want to speak a little bit about that, that would be something that's new for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. They're just wonderful. So ACTS, ACTS. So Adoration, Community, Theology, and Service, Thursday through Sunday. Basically there's a men's version and a women's version, and it's, men and women respectively sharing about their successes and, more frankly, about their failures and how that relates to their faith, and how that's, how they've then use that in their faith journey and how God has used that in their faith journey to bring them closer to him. And so being involved with the Acts community, and those retreats. So those are, parish based. So it's parishioners, is how I got involved with this other ministry. So the Acts retreats are unbelievable. I mean, people in our society have such a difficult time being vulnerable. I know I do. And, when you go on an Acts retreat, basically, you're sharing yourself, ever the river rule, it's called, where you're, things that are shared on the retreat are not shared anywhere else. And it's an opportunity to be vulnerable and be real with people, who, are there as part of their faith. So you can trust and have confidence and share those parts of ourselves that need to be shared more than they are, especially in our society. And so those Acts retreats have been, truly foundational in my faith. And so as a part of that, I was invited to participate. So those Acts retreats are like Thursday through Sunday. You go off to a retreat center and, it's just a wonderful experience. But maybe the more important part is the prayer groups that form after that. And so, for my Acts retreat, we've had a prayer group ever since that meets, in the evening on Mondays. And you've been through that experience with these folks. And so there's a level of understanding and love, shared within that group. So truly, if your parish does not have Acts retreats, I would certainly say, you might look into it.
Yeah. I mean, to chime into that, I mean, I think we all operate within a level of pretense and perhaps, that's just needed. I think there's some level where socially, if we all just opened up and shared everything going on in our life, it might be like, look, thanks for pumping my gas, but I didn't, I didn't need that. Maybe I could direct you. But on the other hand, there's need for us to just be reminded, at least mentally, like, golly, I mean, none of us has done this life perfectly, and not, we've all sinned at the most fundamental level, right? We're all guilty of judgment, right? If we believe in the gospel, and we're all in need of the redemption of Christ. So I mean, maybe there's good reason why we don't all share it from next person to the next person. There can be an oversharing, but on the other hand, you got to share something. Like, I mean, there is some real true healing that doesn't happen unless you just talk about it to somebody else. And so having like this pathway, like this venue, an environment created to be like, here, like, this is your chance. Like, you can let this out and it's going to be okay. You're going to be safe.
It's a safe space to do that in. Oh my gosh. It is truly, truly powerful. And the bonds of friendship that form there are deep and long lasting.
Yeah. I mean, it's intimacy, I suppose, really at the most basic level. Like, this is a chance to be intimate. It's not small talk. It's very opposite of superficiality. Like, I'm really opening myself up. Really, I mean, any of this expression, we protect against it because it opens the possibility to be hurt further. We protect our hurts because we don't want to be hurt further. That's what vulnerability really is all about. And so there is a deep need of trust. Like, if I share this, are you going to use this against me? But then I suppose in then sharing it and then seeing them not hurt you, like, that's got to be the healing. Maybe if I just would sit on that for a moment, like, is that some of it? Be like, wow, you could have hurt me with this, but you're choosing not to. Like, it's just such a tangible expression of love. Of like, okay, there is goodness in this world, right?
And just a mere reflection of the love that God has for us. So if we can have that experience sharing with our fellow human beings and see the redemption and healing from that, imagine, if we could come to understand just how God sees us and the willingness to forgive, it's practice, basically. Practice for our prayer life, I think.
No, I'm sure that just blows doors open on so many levels to have that. So, well, anyhow, so I mean, you had this great experience with Acts, and this really, there was maybe others who felt moved for this next level of ministry. What was it? What came from some of these Acts retreats for you, Joe?
Um, well, I think from the Axe retreats, a willingness to face my own, you know, um, inner self
Yeah.
and the many imperfections and the many failings and, where I've not lived up to what I have wanted to live up to and what Christ calls us to live up to.
Yeah.
But in a context of forgiveness and redemption, which is the key. Because so often inside ourselves, we're reliving those stories, but there's no redemption and there's no forgiveness, especially when we're the only judge.
Yeah.
That's our judge gets in charge and we're kind of keeping God out of it. Unfortunately, when we're telling our story, circulating these stories in our minds, and there's no healing. It's very difficult to have healing. And so you've seen people that have just gotten caught in the downward spiral and they don't heal from it. And so for me, it's about the healing that takes place, and the freedom and the friendships that come from having shared that and having heard other people share those things and loving them and accepting them and know they're doing the same for you. It's what God meant this to be.
Yeah, we're all our own harsh judge or critic, right? We're the worst of the bunch. And, the things that we would judge ourselves against. And really, I mean, if we're being honest, it's more the devil speaking
It
these
is,
judgments against us. But the things that we would judge against ourselves, there would be very few people that we would have anywhere near the sternness or hardness towards others. But yet we're so unyielding and so unwilling. And again, I think so much of that is only rooted in spiritual warfare and the devil.
Absolutely. It keeps us stuck, and that's where Satan wants us.
Yeah, because then it closes, maybe to connect the two ministries here. It starts to close down the possibilities of what could happen. And, I think I referenced this book earlier, but if I haven't, there's a beautiful book. The title of it's called Change for Good. So much of change is just believing that, like, if I take these actions, like, change will happen, and that, like, a new life is possible, and that these dead ends or this, circling, this endless cycle of getting nowhere, like, it doesn't have to always be this way. Like, a new life is possible. Like there's got to be a breakdown maybe of those scripts that run through the head. And perhaps at the end of the day, it's just like when that script hits to counteract it and say, no, that's not true, actually. And I have other experiences, to support now another tale, another narrative, and not let that be the final say, any longer against me. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, with some of the work that you've done, within the prison, perhaps maybe we don't need to go into the details of that. I'm sure you've come across some situations that are pretty gnarly, and yeah, I mean, our work is to forgive people, but sometimes you can be taken back. I'm sure, like, oh gosh, wow, okay, like, this is serious. Like, so what someone's done here is, like, this isn't, they, I don't know, stole candy from a candy store. Like, how have some of those experiences and just seeing and meeting people and seeking to extend that helping hand as you've done in other ministry, how has that impacted you? And maybe if we could speak again back to the financial planning, like, how has this also helped to make you a better advisor?
Yeah. So the Kairos prison ministry has been amazing. So it's basically those Acts retreats that I described, but you go into a maximum security prison and do it there. So if you can imagine, people are on death row. Some of the past retreatants have been executed. Many, I intentionally, and they kind of encouraged this, I did not look up any of the individuals we were going to be involved with. And, I didn't want any of that baggage. But I got to tell you, I brought my own baggage anyway, because I have my own views and, my own fears that have been built up over time, and talk about change. That changed very significantly. I kept being told, well, when you go in there after 10 minutes, you will think it's just another Acts retreat.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. We'll see.
All
But
right.
it's true. It was
Oh,
true.
interesting.
Now, these are self-selected. The individuals are selected and motivated to do this. In some cases, the warden, and others, strongly encourage. And the idea is to encourage some of the tougher nuts in there to lead by example, to try to use that experience of being incarcerated to change their life for the better. But I got to tell you, I was amazed. I mean, in terms of my own perspective of what I think when I think about an inmate who's murdered somebody or whatever that got them into a maximum security prison, I have a completely different perspective on that now. And it comes from getting to know some of these people. And without hesitation, there are some amazing people that have done some amazing change in many years in a hardcore prison. And so, the guy I sat with during a retreat, I enjoyed a great deal. It was amazing to me how many of the other younger inmates were saying, if it weren't for this person, I would have, I don't know what I would have done, because I got in here, I had no idea what to do, and I'm trying to get out and get on parole. And if you don't know, I didn't know until I heard, them talk about it. They need to have a place to stay that approves, they're somebody with their background staying, and they have to have that set up before they are able to leave on parole. And that's hard for many of these people to do. This individual who I end up becoming friends with, sat next to, had been in, kind of over the course of the conversation, it became clear he'd been in there for 25 years and had become a leader, was also a very spiritual person, and had a deep love for Christ. It also became clear through the conversations that he'd killed at least one person. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he killed many number more than that. He changed, and, and if you can change in that situation, you can change in any situation. Yeah. And, one of the things that really stuck out to me are, what do these inmates say, and how do they respond to having a weekend, a Christian? This is a Christian group, not a Catholic group per se. Sure. What is their takeaway? And I think certainly their takeaway is a deepening, or in some cases a beginning of a faith experience, but it also, their most common response at the end of the retreat was, thank you for coming. This is the first time I've been treated like a human being in many years. And that is, was just an experience that clearly was very visceral for them, that at their most, deepest foundation, they feel like refuse, like they've been discarded. Nobody cares. Nobody has hope for them. They are done. And it's just a matter of letting time pass until they pass away. And to treat them like human beings, and more importantly, see them like human beings. The treatment comes out of the, seeing them that way, is what they really appreciated, and what I think touched their hearts.
Yeah, so just this belief again for that there's hope for a future, right? And that this doesn't have to be the last word on a situation. Like it's easy. It's easy in our mistakes, in our weaknesses, our screw ups, and then maybe in our own self-criticism. And again, perhaps just at the end of the day, with the devil's attacks, to keep us held back in, to believe that there is no change, there is no hope, and there is no future for us, and that what we have is as good as it's ever going to get. And then, we skirk off any responsibility, for the changes that we could actually make. The chance that things could get better, we just wish away. And so to help, I suppose, just like to sow the seeds of possibility, like but this is still there for you. Like, your story hasn't been fully spoken. There can be a new chapter to it, and a new life. And maybe to just issue that belief, that faith. I've got to imagine that it's life changing to be like the minister, the vehicle of that message to another person. I'm sure this changes how when you have just conversations, just to take all this aback and like some Joe Schmo wants to talk to you about their money and whatever, challenges, it's not always the case that you have a client who's got, baggage in their history. I mean, we all have some baggage, but maybe they've done just fine for themselves. And thankfully things have gone well enough, but just having an appreciation for their humanity, broadly speaking, but then maybe having an appreciation for them. And maybe I'm just kind of curious, the connection of this back to financial advising. Do you feel like you just speak more directly perhaps with your clients as a result, where like, I'm not going to hold up any pretenses with you. Look, I'm not going to pretend that somehow you're perfect and I'm perfect. And, let's actually have an honest conversation where we get around some of this nonsense. Right?
I think it helps with that. Yeah, for sure. And, that's an area where I still need to grow, is being vulnerable, and as you mentioned before, there's places where you're vulnerable and places where it's not as appropriate to be vulnerable, but being able to go there is, when it's in the client's best interest and what the client really needs, is one of those, capabilities that can be life-changing when it's there, when it needs to be there. And I think, just broadly, the softer skills that this kind of work helps to develop, in compassion for other people. And it doesn't have to be that they're in prison. It can be, retirement can be stressful. And, sometimes you get into retirement through, a job loss you didn't intend. Sometimes you've lost a loved one. I mean, there's all kinds of situations where, being there more than just, here's how we can maximize your financial resources, is what they need, to help them live the best life that they can live. And if we can participate in that, that's great.
Yeah. Joe, I mean, I just think that, sometimes it's the case in our work that we have to have a hard conversation with a client, where they're not, what they're doing isn't what's in their best interest, and we can see it, but it's an uncomfortable conversation. And it's, to some degree, maybe it's a calling them out. And, you can have a fear of how they'll respond or receive that. I mean, we want to obviously respect that it's their money and it's not ours, and they're just asking us to tell them what's best for it. And part of that is for them to have the freedom to only, decline our advice and go a different pathway. But, at the same time, they're needing us to maybe speak directly, to the matter, and not to beat around the bush. Like, perhaps that's what they need, is someone, just almost like the moment ago where you were sharing that one of the prisoners was just thankful to be treated as a human being and to be given respect and hope. Some part of being treated like a human being too is with someone else is willing to care for you enough to potentially lose you because you said something to them, you spoke truth to them that they didn't want to hear, but it needed to be said, right? And so maybe some of this is just, as we wrap up the conversation, it's just like, our humanity, what it needs varies and differs, and it's, what's needed for one person isn't what's needed for another, and like adapting and realizing that, but having the willingness to go there and just say what needs to be said and be present when it needs to be present, and to do these difficult things. Like, that's like, if we're looking at like what makes an advisor a good advisor, like maybe we've hit upon it like that. It's the person who's willing to do the difficult and isn't just going to butter you up as a client because they don't want to lose your business, who can be direct with you and speak to you what you need to hear
in a kind and compassionate way. Right. Yeah. So the saying that, the first question I was kind of pondering as I was thinking about that prison ministry was, what are we going to talk about? I'm going to sit with these people for 3.5 days. And what in the world am I going to have to talk with them about? My experience and their experience, our backgrounds, our futures, our everything is so dramatically different.
Yeah.
And the saying that they repeat over and over, which has truly informed my investment advisory practice is listen, love, love. And it's as simple as that. And that pretty much takes care of what happens with the conversation. And it was, and I use it. I literally, that's, kind of my internal motto as I'm chatting with clients and talking about what they want to do and their dreams and their fears.
But Joe, that's a jewel. What you just shared there, I'm going to say it again, just so the audience can take that away. I feel like that's a jewel right there. Listen, love. Boy, I mean, that's it. I mean, that just sums it all up so well. Like that is the work. This work we need to do. I suppose the work that all of us need to do, but I feel it very applicable in the work of an advisory relationship with a client. Yeah. Again, listen, love. Well, Joe, as we bring the conversation to a close, if someone was hoping to reconnect with you, perhaps they felt touched or moved, maybe they wanted to talk with you about the volunteer experience, maybe they have interest in even working with you as an advisor, what's the best way for someone to connect with you and reach out?
Yeah. So Mayfair-financial.com is the website. Email is joe.petry@mayfair-financial.com. Would love to have the conversations and love meeting new people and helping where I can.
Joe, you're a outstanding guy. I think maybe the only fault we'd have against you is you're a Cards fan. So, but I suppose we'll have to
remember I said what I said about those cards.
Yeah, that's right. Apparently, I won't be getting any calls from folks from St. Louis. They're
That's
who's
funny.
This guy? Oh, that's all right. I'm pretty agnostic.
Been so fun talking with you, Ben. You just you bring out things in people. You're just truly a gifted host, really.
Well, I appreciate that, Joe. It's been fun hosting this. Hopefully the audience continues to enjoy and found value. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time to listen in on this. This was a great episode. Really enjoyed and connected it. And folks, if you're looking for advisors who can help you in your finances, but it's not just your finances, your money. I mean, there's so much of the work we do just has to deal with intimacy. It's an opportunity for someone who's needing to share things. And, we're not therapists, but we do get a lot of vulnerable expressions that come to work. If you're looking for someone, especially someone who shares your values of faith, of belief, if you're Catholic, you're Christian, what have you, please reach out to the Catholic Financial Planners Network. We're growing, spread the word. We'd love to be able to connect with you and see how we can be of help. So Joe, I hope a few people reach out and connect with you. We really enjoyed our conversation today. And then for our audience, God's blessings to all of you. Until next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Ben.